Hello, BookTube. I have a comic book review for you today. I don't usually do that. Usually I reserve my comic book content for Wednesdays when I do Epic Comic Book Wednesday with Michael K. Vaughan. But, A, the comic book that I'm reviewing today is connected with what Mike and I talked about yesterday. And B, there's a certain little mint julep out there who just can't get enough of my comic book related content. I didn't want to ruin her day, so I thought I would make a review of Werewolf by Night #1 from Marvel Comics. Yesterday, on Epic Comic Book Wednesday, Michael K. Vaughan and I talked about the original 1970s run of Werewolf by Night on Marvel Comics. And it was a lot of fun. I don't watch his video ahead of making mine, but I always watch it as soon as I'm done with mine to see whether or not I accidentally bumped into the same number of points that he did. I knew where we would disagree on Werewolf by Night. I knew that we would disagree because he loves monster comics, and I knew we would also disagree because he loves the artist Mike Ploog. So that's going to make the original 1970s Werewolf by Night a hit with him. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my reread of it a lot more than I thought I would. And at the time in that video, I mentioned that Werewolf by Night is still very much an active copyright for Marvel Comics, and that yesterday they came out with the first issue. Well, my surly houseboy got me the first issue, and I read it. So I thought I would talk about it a little with you. This is written by Tim Liu with artwork by Sergio Davila. So you've got this front cover, then a black prologue page, then a big two-page spread. So you've got not Tim Liu, Jason Liu, and Sergio Davila. And then you've got the issue. Marvel Comics long since has given up on paid advertisement from anyone outside of Marvel Comics. It's just house ads. So you've just got page after page after page of Werewolf by Night, #1. And I liked this issue. There were things about it that I liked and things about it that I didn't like, but on balance, I liked it enough. The acid test that you will know whether or not you actually like a first issue is if you are willing to read the second issue. And I am. If my surly houseboy were to get me Werewolf by Night #2, I would definitely read it. So, I guess where we should start is with the negatives. There were fewer positives than negatives, but the positives are stronger. So we'll finish up with those. We can start with the negatives. There are two things that I thought going into this issue. Two things that I didn't know anything about this. Didn't know that Marvel was coming out with it until the day before yesterday. But there were two things that I expected from, a first issue in Marvel Comics, but also any Marvel Comics issue in the current era, since 2015. One of those things is Marvel is utterly consumed by mega events. Fans hate them. They don't do well for sales. Fans are very vocal about, could we please knock them off? And Marvel Comics management does not care. They just do not care. When they have their editorial powwows, their editorial meetings every year, they do it twice a year, all they talk about is what major event can we do next. And at two of those meetings ago, there were open comments about how, the chuds don't like these major events. Oh, good, then we should do more of them. Fans don't like these things. They are a fairly soulless way to artificially gin up sales because the events are strung over 12 or 13 different books that you have to buy in order just to understand the whole. And the reason that Marvel does that is because if they didn't do that, if they just made an isolated standalone event, it would not sell at all. Right now, an average Marvel comic book sells about 1,000 issues a month, which is not enough. Let's be clear about that. That's not enough to justify just the manufacturing cost, to say nothing of the employment of the people involved in drawing, writing, editing, lettering, coloring. That's not enough money. Every full-color, floppy Marvel superhero comic loses money in the office. They lose money in the field. They lose money in sales and are just buoyed up by a multi-trillion-dollar company. That's all there is to it. And if you know that, well, then you don't have to care what your fans like and don't like because you're no longer connected to sales. But those mega events, they wouldn't sell at all. They wouldn't make 1,000. They wouldn't sell 1,000 copies a month. Keep in mind, all across the country we're talking about. They wouldn't sell 1,000 copies a month. They wouldn't sell any copies at all. Diehard, dedicated Marvel fans hate those events. They're done to spite the fans. And they're one of many, 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 many things that Marvel Comics does to spite the fans, who pay the bills, or should. I guess it's not. I guess they don't pay the bills, right? It's Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark that pays the bills. But the one thing that I expected from this was that this would be connected to a whole bunch of mega events in ways that are going to make me feel like I need to read a whole lot of stuff that I haven't read in order to understand this issue. I was expecting that would happen. In other words, that this thing would violate the number one duty, the number one job of any first issue, which is to introduce you to all of the concepts and make you feel like you're getting in at ground level. If your first issue doesn't do that, it's not a first issue. You're continuing some other story. And if you are going to make all sorts of allusions to all sorts of events that are not part of this first issue, but that are important to it, that's what's going to happen. So I was expecting that. And I was expecting one other thing as well, because this is a Marvel comic post 2014, 2015, which is that the main character will not be the character named in the book. if the character named in the book is a man. I was expecting, just like I found the only other comic book review that I've done recently on this channel was Savage Sword of Conan, #1, which is not a Marvel comic, but it is a contemporary comic book put out in the contemporary world. And the comic book world has been almost completely ideologically captured. So Marvel especially, Marvel is ground zero for that ideological capture. So I assumed that if there was a Werewolf by Night #1, at some point in the issue, the Werewolf by Night that at some point in the issue, the Werewolf by Night will be easily defeated by a woman and upstaged by a woman. Not just defeated, but that it will be essentially her comic book. We saw that in Savage Sword of Conan #1. That's exactly what happened. Conan was a helpless bystander in the adventures of someone else. And I assumed going into this issue that that would be true here as well, because this is zealots are going to zealot, as the kids say on Twitter. There is no way that a Marvel comic is going to be produced without that. So I was expecting those two things. That this thing would be utterly dependent on antecedent events about which I know nothing, which makes it a bad first issue. And that since the main character here, the Werewolf by Night, is a man, Jack Russell, as we saw yesterday in Werewolf by Night from the 70s, this is a man named Jack Russell who is cursed, has a family curse to turn into a werewolf during the full moon. He's cursed by that. He's not happy about it. It's the thing that happens to him. But since Marvel Comics is keeping that continuity, and since their Werewolf by Night is still Jack Russell, who is a white man, I assumed that would be true in this issue. And the two foremost negative things about this issue is that both of those things happen. Exactly as I expected. We encounter Jack Russell in a ruined Transylvanian castle in the Colorado Rockies. And this is referenced in Deadpool the Gauntlet miniseries, and also Werewolf by Night #1 from 2023, because there was a Werewolf by Night first issue in 2023, and then in one other issue as well. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find that right away, but there's also another reference. So you just to take it in your stride here that there is a Transylvanian-style castle in the Colorado Rockies. It's not that much of a thing. It's not as bad as some of the other impositions that we get in this issue. But here we have the stereotypical vlogger talking about how he's, hey guys, remember to like and subscribe. I'm going to go and explore the ruins of this castle. We get some good artwork by Sergio Davila, but also some lazy artwork. The kid encounters a destroyed tentacle creature and is stunned. And then it's not completely destroyed because it moves away while he's got his flashlight on it. And if you'll see here, this is the same panel with one detail removed by a computer program. Same thing. And hence lazy. And he is so concerned with the tentacle creature that he misses the fact that Jack Russell is standing right there, telling him to get out of his house. And here we have a small feature of current day Marvel Comics, which is forced expletives. That's been a feature since 2014, 2015. You get them bleeped out, but they are part of the dialogue. Forced expletives here. All the characters have incredible potty mouths. And Jack Russell scares him away. He is cleaning up this dead tentacle creature and the blood spatters. And one of the things that Jason Liu does well here is to fill you in. While we watch him cleaning up and swabbing the blood-stained walls of his castle, we get a quick, very effectively done exposition dump about who he is, what he's doing here. It's pretty much done by here, which is neat. It's not a visual flashback. It should be, but it isn't. But it's still very well done. And it turns out that the tentacle creature is not entirely dead. And one tentacle grabs him, and he transforms into Werewolf by Night. I think that the visual here is supposed to give us the impression that he only transforms because clouds blew away from the moon. Didn't think that was how things worked. He turns into a werewolf at the full moon, not just because he's being touched by the moonlight. And also, if he's relying on random cloud cover to stop him from becoming a ravenous, mindless monster of destruction, well then, so that blogger survived by random chance? The kid is alive only because there happen to be clouds over the moon? It's a convenient transformation, and apparently retcons the idea that Jack Russell can transform into a werewolf at will, which I kind of like. I like the fact that this being a curse, something that happened to him against his will. It's just the convenient timing that I'm really against here. And we also get, from Sergio Davila, we get a little bit of, I'm going to call it an homage, I'm not going to call it a theft, I'm going to call it an homage. We get this panel here, where the werewolf rips apart this tentacled creature with a spill of blood and entrails, and any of you who know your Marvel Comics are going to recognize that scene. I think you will probably recognize that scene. Just think of, think of the Siege miniseries from Marvel Comics from about 10 years ago, and think of the character, the Sentry, and the character of Ares, the Greek god of war. And the scene should come straight to mind there. But that's not all that Jack Russell does. He destroys that tentacle creature, but he does have a life of his own in the Colorado Rockies. He runs a little ferry, ferrying people around in his normal life. Keeps a normal, low-profile civilian life. And he, on this ferry, escorts two friends of his, Donna and Ted. They are, of course, an interracial couple. And they are doing some sort of research, and he is ferrying them on his ferry, which is inconsistently drawn. Now, it's a small detail. I don't care. Not that much. I don't know how much of this work Sergio Davila is leaving to a computer program. I don't know how much of it he is. I know that he's leaving some of it to a computer program. It's very obvious in some panels. See, the writing on that case is simply imposed type. Davila never wrote that. He never drew that onto a crate. He drew a crate and then put computer words on it, which is why they stand out. Their perspective is not the same as the rest of the crate, and they look computer generated. They're immaculate. They don't look like they're carved into wood. But we get the ferry, which has a foot distance between the edge and the railing, except for when it doesn't. See where the railing goes all the way to the edge, and there is no foot there. It's a small detail, but it's a trifle careless. And then we get the first of the two big things that I was waiting for, which is the flat-out imposition of other Marvel Comics events that you shouldn't be expected to know about in the first issue of anything. The first issue is where you recount the character's origin story. Okay, we did that. We didn't do it visually, but we did it. Where you tell us who the character is, what they are, where they are, what their current mind frame is. You're not supposed to allude to a gigantic Marvel event that I guess was called Blood Hunt, and where we get this. a 2-page spread. At first, I thought this was another in-house ad, but it turns out this is part of the story. We get Jack Russell ferrying these two people to shore. Then something called Blood Hunt intervenes. No idea what that was. Not explained. And then when it's over, we go back to him being Werewolf by Night and waking up in his castle. And he tells us, the world plunged into darkness before the new moon emerged. A blood hunt, as the radio reported it. Then I lost control. So he's lost a few days. And you notice Jack Russell is not a teenager anymore. He's a big, gnarly, lumberjacky grown man. And he comes across those two friends of his, only they are dead. They are violently, horribly dead. Torn apart, obviously, by a werewolf. He naturally suspects that it was him, that he's the one who tore them apart. And their death scene is extremely explicit. This issue came in a plastic bag. This is a red band comic book from Marvel, new thing of theirs. This came in a plastic bag with a red band around the middle. I didn't save it. I wish I had. I could have opened it on camera. I wasn't sure that I was going to get this, much less that I was going to talk about it. And that red band is supposed to indicate a higher level of visual gore. And you definitely get that here. And then we cut to a coven in Transylvania, a coven of supernatural creatures, vampires and ghouls and whatnot, who are trying to revive a cult that hovers around the Darkhold, an ancient manuscript that was actually in the original Werewolf by Night issues, and then played a pivotal role in the Avengers, and has since moved on to play a pivotal role in the whole mythos surrounding the Scarlet Witch and Agatha Harkness. And you've got this group of monsters there. Davil is really good here. This is all really, really good. The detail here is really, really good. It pays just sitting and staring at it. But he can vary. When he's either showing that there are some aspects of drawing comics that he has not mastered yet with a pen and an easel on a board, or when he shows that there are limitations to the computer software that he's using, whatever the reason is, there are limitations. Here we get the melodramatic entrance of a character called Deathwatch. And here you can see what I mean. Where is that foot? This right here is steps, but it quickly turns into a brick wall. There's no sense of stairs here at all. And that crops up in a few places in this book where simple items like depth and perspective don't seem to be handled all that confidently. And it turns out that Deathwatch is merely the minion. He's deadly. But he's a minion of another character, the main villain of the piece, the Hood, who I know only from Avengers Dark Reign and the evil version of Marvel's Illuminati. Fairly interesting character, a thug basically who gets control of a couple of mystical items, Norn stones from Asgard, or a knockoff version of Doctor Strange's Cloak of Levitation. He gets control of some magical artifacts, and that makes him a player, which is a kind of fun idea. And he is written with a huge amount of zest. Our ghouls don't like him. They don't like his presumption at all. But he's written with a fair amount of zest, and so is Deathwatch. That's another little item of post-2014 Marvel Comics, is that the writers, rather disconcertingly, seem obviously to more enjoy writing the villains than the heroes. I'm not going to delve into the psychology here, but it's definitely true in this issue. And he talks with this coven about, their bwahaha plans. And then we got back to the castle. That afternoon, that evening, as the sun is going down. We go back to the Rockies. And once we go back to the Rockies, we get the second of the two things that I was expecting. So we got a big introduction, an intrusion, a 2-page intrusion of an event, a mega event in Marvel continuity that I don't know anything about. I don't know what Blood Hunt is. And I don't want to have to know in order to understand or enjoy the first issue of Werewolf by Night. Now, in this case, that element is fairly handleable, because it's not necessary. Lou doesn't make it necessary for us to understand what that event was. All we need to know is that something intervened in Jack Russell's life, and then he comes back to his normal world and finds his dead friends. But at least so far in this issue, the actual events of that Blood Hunt mega story are not involved. He would have found those remains anyway. So, where number one, that Marvel's first issue is not a first issue, that it's just a continuing sales gimmick for other things, is a little bit minor. It did happen, but it didn't happen to the extent that I was expecting. That leaves me with worry number two, which is that this book is going to belong to a woman who is going to best the main character easily, motivate the main character, supersede the main character, and be in every way more impressive than the main character. And that's when we get to the second half of the book, in which we meet this woman who has arrived at the castle. I don't know how she's arrived there. Did she drive in the Colorado Rockies? If she did, why didn't she close the last 5 miles? And if she didn't, then how did she get there? But her name is Elsa Bloodstone, and she is actually a holdover. I don't know about what role she played in the mega event that I'm talking about, but she's a holdover from the Marvel movie that I talked to you about, the Marvel one-shot movie Werewolf by Night. Rather well done. The concept is rather well done. Bloodstone as a character in in Marvel Comics was a man originally, but his powers arose from a mystical gem, and it moves on to Elsa Bloodstone. And she arrives at this castle because she wants to check up on her old friend. She and Jack Russell are old friends. And she's moving around. It's well done artwork. Again, this is well done artwork. When she finds him, she finds him in something called a loud room, because this is another aspect of post 2014 Marvel Comics, which is that they're juvenile. Not that they're aimed at kids. Obviously, the gore and innuendo in this book is not aimed at kids, but rather that the writers think this is all just beneath them. So they put in all sorts of cutesy poo humor. Why would the haunted, tormented Jack Russell put a sign on a room saying loud room? Why would he do that? No, that's just you having a little bit of cutesy poo fun, because you don't take any of this stuff seriously, because what you really want to do is write for HBO. But she encounters Jack Russell. Remember, he has found his friends dismembered. This is the sort of thing that happened to Jack Russell in the 1970s, as he fought against his curse and tried to figure out a way to live and control what's going on. And his way in the first issue of his own comic book is to chain himself to a wall and give up. So the werewolf can't break those chains, and he's just going to die. So when he's not the werewolf, he'll just starve to death, because he killed those people, and that there's really no reason for him to go on. Donna and Ted were kind neighbors of mine. When I did my morning walk around the premises, I found their bodies. I left them with the local sheriffs. I know my own claw marks and fang impressions. So he knows that he's to blame. And she isn't sure that he is. She is willing not only to buck him up, but to renew his sense of purpose. When her mystical gem, the Bloodstone gem, activates his werewolfism. So in both cases where he becomes a werewolf in this issue, there's a little bit of question in my mind. Is it direct moonlight that does it? If so, then why would you need to chain yourself to a wall when you're inside a room? And if it's not direct moonlight, if it can be anything mystical, well, then what happened to the Jack Russell who could control this? And who also had memories of what he's doing. Remember, the Werewolf by Night that we saw in those 70s issues, at first it starts off that Jack Russell can't remember what he's doing, but then he not only remembers, but thinks just like himself the whole time. Not so here. Instead, he loses control when he comes close to the Bloodstone gem, and becomes a roided out version of Werewolf by Night. And she's trying to recall him to himself, saying, it's me, I'm your friend, get control of yourself. But she's not even the slightest bit inconvenienced by being attacked ruthlessly by the star of the show. Not the slightest bit inconvenienced. She said if he were any other monster, he would be dead right now. But this is an intervention for a monster friend. She says, I know hundreds of ways to slay a monster, but finding an effective way to stop one who's also a good friend and who's surrounded himself with a hodgepodge of homeware and antique shops, then, girl, you're out of luck. It's a fairly well done action sequence, although notice the background disappears completely. When Davila does action, it tends to be the only thing you see, which, again, is a little bit on the lazy side for comic book art. Just a bit. If the artists in the original Werewolf by Night had done an entire what have we got here? 6-panel comic page of a fight between two characters, and it was just them and sound effects, but no background at all. Letter writers in the 1970s would have pointed that out. They would have written in and said, well, that, love the issue, fan of the concept, but come on, you can do better than this. Which might be why Marvel doesn't do letters columns. I don't know. They're calling for letters in this issue. But instead of killing him, she realizes at the last minute that her best option is to incapacitate him with the Bloodstone gem. Just to blast him with a bolt of energy. And it works. She didn't work up a sweat in not only finding, rescuing, and motivating, but also easily incapacitating our main character. And we presume that they will figure out, that's a cliffhanger, we presume they'll figure out what to do together. The issue doesn't end there. The issue goes back to Transylvania, back to that coven, where we see that they are raising an army of the undead in the streets of Transylvania. And we get a lot of attention to them. The villain gets at least as much attention in this book as the hero does. And the hero is a sad sack who gives up at the first sign of adversity and needs to be completely rescued by the woman who takes over the book. I'm pretty sure that the second issue of this will not be called Werewolf by Night and also Elsa Bloodstone. I'm pretty sure it won't be called Elsa Bloodstone, guest starring Werewolf by Night. But who knows if the same thing will continue. But those were the bad things, the things that irritated me. And the two main ones there, I almost want to say that I wasn't irritated because they are so common to Marvel Comics. You almost won't read a Marvel comic without those two things. Thing number one being a huge leveraging of sales gimmicks to other items that are not part of the issue that you bought. Very much with the implication that simply buying this issue makes you a kind of a bad fan. You should be buying lots of issues. And we're not going to explain them to you because you should be buying them instead. And thing number two is Take Charge Girl Boss Who Need No Man. And those two things are so endemic to Marvel, to comics just in general these days. So endemic to them that it's almost impossible to find a comic book that doesn't have them. So although I was expecting them, and although I knew they would hurt my enjoyment of this issue, I wasn't overly infuriated when they both, like clockwork, happened. So I was able to enjoy the stuff that was good. Lou's writing is good, and Davo's artwork is good. The main executions of this issue are very well done. They're very well done. The artistic quibbles that I had were just that. They're just quibbles. And not only are you brought on board effectively, Lou brings you effectively on board as to who Jack Russell is and what he's dealing with, but you are given a story. Yes, he found his friends mauled to death, and he thinks he's responsible, but it also felt off to him. He says to Elsa Bloodstone, the star of the book, that it felt off to him. And she says, well, then we don't know it was you. Or if it was you, well, you might have been affected by something that made you do it. And so you weren't yourself. You weren't to blame. He's worried that he's going to lose his normal life. That's well done. That's a good concern for Werewolf by Night, especially since he's not an itinerant wanderer in this book. He has a home in the Colorado Rockies. And as a reader, you are engaged enough with that creepy cult in Transylvania to wonder if maybe they are connected with whatever happened to him that causes him, A, not to recognize his friend, and B, maybe to kill people that he knew. In other words, Lou does a very good job of making a story to the point where when I was done with issue number 1, I wanted to read issue number 2. So there you go. There's a 30-minute review of Marvel's new Werewolf by Night. It did what comics do. The two main things that comics do. They cannot start fresh because they're trying to leverage their other properties. They're trying to make you feel guilty that you didn't spend enough money. Because surely you should have bought... What was the name of it? Dark Hunt? Was that the name of it? Blood Hunt. You're supposed to know about this. And if you don't, well, go and buy the back issues. And also that women cannot experience hardship. They cannot be punched. They cannot raise a sweat in a fight, even if they're fighting Galactus. They are superior beings sojourning in Marvel Comics. all the stuff that made Marvel Comics about heroes who have to try and who can experience real hardships and you tap into their inner heroism to rise above. That's true for the men to the extent that they do until they quit. But it's absolutely not true for the women. Any woman, any female character. Nope, not at all. She can't lose in a fight, and she can't have a setback of any kind. Issue number 2, I will read it. I don't know that I'll do a review of it, but I guarantee you that the explanation of what's happening to Jack Russell will come entirely from Elsa Bloodstone. She will figure everything out and probably mock him a little while she's doing it. It's just it's the price you pay for reading contemporary comic books, which is why I barely do it anymore. But this was such a nice gesture, and it dovetails so well with yesterday's Epic Comic Book Wednesday that I felt I should. So that was Werewolf by Night, number 1. Not, in fact, a failure. I enjoyed it and was willing to read on. So maybe I will. Maybe I'll do issue number 2 next month. Lord knows I have had lots of requests for me to review Savage Sword of Conan. More than just issue number 1. To review issue number 2 or number 3. I've had a lot of requests to do that. I haven't had the nerve to do it because I know what I'm going to find. I know what I'm going to find. But nevertheless, I thought that I would find it in a Marvel comic since they're ground zero, this kind of crap. And I didn't. I found what I was looking for, sure. But I found a lot of good stuff, too. So maybe I will do issue number 2. We shall see. But anyway, there's a freelance, freewheeling inclusion of a number 1 issue for you. I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.